Hello and welcome to this SIPS Futures mini-series, brought to you by the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply and partnered with Resolution. Thank you for joining us today for our third and final episode of this Navigating Supplier Disputes mini-series. We hope you've enjoyed the first two episodes, and I'll assume you have if you're still with us. As a reminder, we've partnered with conflict management experts Resolution for this series, and we're joined by two of their knowledgeable team for this final instalment. So far, we've talked about why disputes happen, how procurement should approach the challenges that disputes create, and what soft skills and traits are important for procurement professionals in managing conflict. As our guest on episode 2, Kurt Warren, explained, sometimes there is nothing more effective than sitting around a table and resolving a dispute over a cup of good old-fashioned tea or coffee. But there are tools to help procurement on this journey as well. And in this final episode, we'll understand a little bit more about how one tool, AI, can do so. Or should I say is doing so. Our two guests will talk us through current use cases, such as flagging contractual risks, to help catch potential causes of conflict early, or even stop them from happening altogether. We'll also look at the risks of AI and ask what future dispute resolution scenarios may look like when humans and technology pool their resources together. So let's get going. Welcome back, Faye. Great to have you with us again. As a reminder for everyone, Faye is founder and CEO of our partner for this mini-series, Resolution. Faye has significant background and experience in dispute and conflict management across a broad range of public and private sector roles. So welcome back, Faye.
Thank you for having me.
And we're also joined on this episode by Hewelt, Head of AI and Data at Resolution. Hi, Kasia. Great to have you on the pod with us. Do you want to just share a little bit about your role?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Kasia, Head of AI, as you just said. And at Resolution, I look after our AI strategy and architecture, making sure we are using the latest technologies in ways that really support the business.
Let's get straight into it, I think. We'll pick up from where we left episode 2, Faye. Last time we finished on the question of how technology might help resolve disputes in tandem with the right approach from people. If you can expand on that point a little bit for us to kick us off, how specifically is technology and AI in particular helping in conflict management, dispute resolution, and specifically for procurement and supply professionals?
So I always like to start with the data. And if we consider the data, kind of why disputes. So 1 in 5 is the volume of commercial relationships that experience regular conflict and dispute. So it's directly applicable to supply managers, contract managers, procurement, and the work that we do on a daily basis. And then if we think about the percentage that are managed by non-legal business functions, so that is your procurement and supply management teams, it's 80 to 90%. So it's really, really important for these roles. And all of us know that we're always looking for ways to save in the procurement function, in the supply management function, or the direct cost to businesses of conflict and dispute is 900 billion globally. So it's a huge number. It's directly applicable to these roles, and there's lots of savings to be made if we get it right. There are 73% of businesses that are concerned that these costs are rising, and that percentage comes from people in procurement management, supply management roles directly. So people are recognizing there's stuff happening and we need to do things about it. So then we turn to technology and why technology. So AI specifically, it helps to remove the friction that prolongs and escalates disputes. And it does this by not just helping in that resolution process, but also addressing the triggers. So some of the primary triggers for conflict and disputes are the way contractual documents are put together. And we're not talking about indemnity clauses or liability clauses. We're talking about the scope of work, how the benefits are reflected in the contract, how the goals are interpreted and reflected in the contract. So those are all really important triggers that we can get right. And technology helps us with that detail. It helps us check those big, lengthy documents and make sure nothing has been missed. Spotting the early warning signals. So AI is brilliant to do that as well. It can help us with contracts, communications, other commercial documents, delivery data, helping us identify where tensions are rising when we're in the midst of our busy day-to-day jobs. And I've talked about the resolution process, but it can also really streamline and build efficiency into those resolution workflows. So there's so much that AI can do as a companion, as a co-pilot to procurement and supply management professionals.
Really interesting use of the word companion there, and I think that's something that comes out a lot. Is there is obviously a concern that if technology is this good, is it going to replace what good procurement and supply professionals, good contract management professionals are doing? But you see it more as a companion, do you?
Absolutely. I always say that this human in the loop element is really important. So it's humans that built the AI and the large language models. It's humans that tune it, and humans are absolutely necessary to make sure it performs well. So there should always be human in the loop, but it's built for people. It's to help us become more efficient. It's to help us be better at what we do on a daily basis, not to replace. And as with any big technology innovation, it feels new, but emails didn't replace us, and AI is not going to do that either.
We talked a lot about the triggers of conflict, but certainly between procurement and suppliers in episode 1 and touched on it in episode 2 as well. There's lots of reasons, but contracts are obviously one of those core elements to that. Kasia, in your role as head of AI and data, can you talk a bit more broadly about how AI is being used in contract management today? Where are we seeing the most kind of practical impact at the moment for procurement?
Of course, AI is changing contract management by generally making the whole process faster, more accurate, and a lot less manual. For example, AI can now create first drafts of contracts and suggest useful clauses, which means contracts are ready quicker with fewer mistakes. It also helps during the review stage. For example, spotting risky terms or compliance issues that would normally take a human hours to go through. And big reason AI is so good at this is because it's powered by specialized text models. These models are trained to really understand the meaning of language, not just scanning the words. And since contracts, are all about the precise text, it makes AI especially powerful in this space. Another example, another big area is compliance. AI can keep an eye on new regulations and even update contract templates automatically, which helps companies stay compliant and avoid future problems. Then we've got things like very popular summarization, where AI can take a lengthy contract to boil it down to the key points or pull out important details like costs, deadlines, or obligations, so decision makers can act faster. Finally, AI is automating the everyday stuff like reminders, approvals, renewals. Deadlines aren't missed, and the whole cycle just moves smoothly and faster. The impact is clear. Companies using AI are seeing contracts more through the cycle up to 39% faster. Errors are reduced by about 35%, and cost cut by around 31%. And these numbers are coming from the latest Word CC reports. The key thing is what Faye already has mentioned. AI isn't replacing humans. Instead, it is handling the routine work so professionals can focus on the bigger picture, the strategy, negotiations, relationships, and decisions that really drive the value.
You've mentioned here that it can spot red flags in contracts and help spot those early, which is great. What about, we've seen this year, and putting it into the context of lots of macro changes in the economic environment, changes in tariffs, for example, that are going on. Can it spot clauses that might change significantly by events out of a supplier's control, for example, if prices change halfway through the contract length? Are there elements that that AI can help you future-proof your contracts in a way?
Yes, it can spot, as you just mentioned, red flags. That depends on outside events. A great example here is force majeure, clauses that release a supplier from obligations if there is a natural disaster, war, or supply chain disruption. AI can scan thousands of contracts, pull out where these clauses are, and show which ones are worded in a way that might expose your business more than you'd like. And I can recognize when, for example, liability clause shifts to mask risk to your site, or when confidentiality terms doesn't line up with your company's standards policy. It can flag vague language like reasonable efforts versus best efforts. And that small difference could have a big impact in a dispute.
What kind of data can AI analyze specifically in contracts in particular, structured, unstructured data? What does that look like?
Yes. So when we are talking about the data in contracts, as you said, it's really two categories, structured and unstructured. Structured data is the kind that looks like it belongs into a spreadsheet. Dates, deadlines, payment amounts, discount rates, party names. AI can extract this information instantly and feed it into CRMs, alert system dashboards, etc. That means instead of someone manually checking hundreds of contracts for renewal dates, AI can just surface all of them in seconds. Then there is unstructured data, which is the tricky part. This is where the dense legal text, the whereas clauses, the exceptions, the carve-outs, it's unstructured because it doesn't follow a fixed pattern. It's written in natural language. And this is where modern AI really stands out. These text models don't just look for keywords. They actually understand the meaning and the context of the language. So in other words, structured data tells you the facts, the dates, the money, the deadlines. Unstructured analysis tells you the story, where the risks are hiding and where terms don't align and where future conflicts might come from. AI puts those two pieces together and gives companies a much clearer proactive view of their contract landscape.
Faye, taking a step back a little bit, if we're using AI and tech in conflict resolution and disputes, how do we ensure that it's used positively? So, for example, the outcomes are fair and consistent. I guess there is that element of a human being needing to be in the loop that you've already mentioned. But what are your thoughts on that?
It ultimately comes from design and governance when we're talking about technology or AI specifically. And there are three matters that I think are really important, which is transparency, first of all. You should be able to see how the AI has reached a conclusion, not just get handed a recommendation. So that's really important, that visibility as to how has this answer come about. The second is consistency. So the brilliant thing about AI is that it works on rules and it can apply rules uniformly. And that actually reduces bias. As human beings, bias can creep into the things that we do, the decisions we make, but AI is much more disciplined in the way that it applies rules, which means that case by case, you get that consistency. And the third one, just linking to that human in the loop, is the human oversight. So AI should never make the final decision for your business, but it can absolutely inform and it can definitely support. And it can give you the ability to weigh fairness and context and impact, pulling out things that you may not even thought of, because that's what it's brilliant at. So I think AI in this way acts as a leveler. And if fairness and consistency is important, then AI is brilliant at this. And it can support what can sometimes otherwise be an unequal playing field because of resources or negotiating power. It bridges that gap.
You mentioned that AI works on rules. Talking more specifically, I guess, for resolution and the technology that you're using, who creates these rules? Is it yourself as the tech provider? Do you do it in tandem with your potential client, so the procurement team that you're working with? Because I guess rules might change based on the company, the context, the location, etc.
So I think the first thing, a lot of technology platforms today have been built from the outside in. And that means people who are great at tech but don't have that domain insight. Resolution is very different because we are built by domain experts. So people who have worked in procurement and worked in supplier management and have that deep domain expertise. And so resolution, our rules are built on best practice, and that evolves, and that's really important. So I don't believe, first of all, any AI platform should be static. The rules it abides by, the knowledge that fuels it should be accurate, but it should also evolve as best practice evolves. The second thing that we do specifically at Resolution is we can integrate business documents. So companies will have charters, frameworks, policies, ways of working, playbooks. We can build all of that into customer environments so that the AI not just aligns with best practice, but also understands your business in the way that you want to work as an organization, because no two businesses are the same.
How do you ensure a resolution that the data that AI is being trained on, so I guess in this case, contracts within an organization, for example, is accurate and protected? I know Faye just kind of touched on that a little bit, but is there potential for AI to give something confidential away when it's renegotiating with a client, for example, or trying to resolve a conflict?
That's a really, really important question, because with contracts, you're dealing with some of the most confidential information a company has. So the first thing to understand is that most of the AI models we use are already pre-trained on huge amounts of text. They are not learning from your contracts every time you upload one. Instead, what really matters is the context and the instructions you're giving to the model. If you ask it to summarize, it stays within this task. If you tell it to, let's say, highlight risks, it focuses there. It's not inventing its own goals. It's following the prompts and the boundaries you set. From there, you choose the right model for the job, whether it's summarizing, checking compliance, or flagging risks. Sometimes companies will go even further and fine-tune a model, which simply means teaching it to better follow your way of working. For example, maybe your company always prefers a certain wording in liability clauses or has a very specific renewal policy. Fine-tuning is like giving the model extra lessons on those preferences so it speaks your language. But this is where you have to be careful. You wouldn't just feed customer or supplier contracts straight into the training or fine-tuning, because that could expose sensitive data. If fine-tuning is needed, you either anonymize the contract or even generate synthetic examples. So the model learns the patterns, best practices, without storing or leaking private details. To the point about the risk of giving confidential information away, this is where design really matters, and Faye already tackled on this. Well-implemented contract AI doesn't pass your document to the counterparty or expose them outside your system. It runs inside a secure platform and analyzes the text privately. What you get are risk signals or recommendations. For example, it might highlight the renewal window is unusually short, or this liability clause is riskier than your standard. In other words, the AI is there to prepare your team with better awareness. It's not sending your actual contract or confidential terms to anyone else. The real risk comes if companies are using the wrong setup, like plugging sensitive contracts into a public AI tool without any guardrails. That's why governance is also very important. So you keep the data inside a encrypted private system, you control access, and you define exactly how the AI can be used. And once done right, AI becomes a trusted assistant, helping you negotiate smarter and spot risk earlier, without ever leaking your confidential information.
Faye, I'm just thinking here. We've talked a little bit, around the piece around AI and tech, and there's a clear kind of pathway for it supporting procurement and supply professionals. But specifically on resolution, can you just walk me through very quickly an idea of, if a client came to you and started working with resolution, they had a conflict, what does that look like? How does resolution help resolve that conflict? What would be the kind of process in which it would do so?
We have what we call an end-to-end platform with deep infrastructure. So that means that we can support with the resolution flow. And we have something that is almost a cross between mediation and expert determination, which can engage two parties and help them come to a sensible commercial outcome based on commercial best practice with a focus on the relationship and how to not just resolve the issue, but make it work for the long term. And in that process, there are recommendations. So, what's really important to us is that we're not just fixing the one issue, but we're providing that extra value. So, our platform will also say, okay, well, based on this scenario, here are some things you can do going forwards to make sure you don't end up in this situation again. But beyond that, our platform also offers support with the things that trigger conflict and disputes. So that helps organizations limit and minimize that cost exposure and the kind of risk that something could come up anyway. And then at the other end, it supports with continuous improvement. So it can now look at your environment and tell you, okay, well, based on what we can see, here are some opportunities. Here are some horizon risks, and it can help people work in a really smart way. So yes, we do that resolution part when there are meaty conflicts, and that saves so much money, because if you think about the alternative, it's going to consultancies or law firms and engaging them. And, often that just increases the friction. So yes, we do that resolution part, but we also look at, okay, how do we help you get better as an organization? How do we strengthen you as a team? And how do we act as a real co-pilot to make sure you always get the best outcomes and limit that risk and exposure to your business?
In terms of procurement practitioner using resolution, would they talk directly to the resolution tech? Would resolution tech ever talk directly to the supplier, or is it very much advised that you use it internally and then use the outputs based on your best judgment to then talk to the supplier and obviously keep that human relationship up?
Yeah, so we offer both. There are some stakeholders who prefer to manage things independently, so we support that. And the platform can support individuals and teams in the background. However, we also have functionality that can engage suppliers directly, which is brilliant for efficiency, freeing up people to do other things. And it can run those processes autonomously, independently. And so we do both, essentially.
Where is this all heading, do you think, Faye? Is the net result that we might end up one day with AI models negotiating with AI models? I might be going a little bit far into the future there, but what impact, I suppose, will this have on the procurement and supply profession? And what would be your message to practitioners to think about how technology might support them in areas like conflict and dispute resolution?
I'd love to say that that's far down the line, but we actually already see AI models that are negotiating elements of contracts, and we already have machine-to-machine negotiations happening. So we're already there. And I think for procurement and supply chain teams, what does this look like? Well, we'll start to see more routine and transactional negotiations happening, perhaps over delivery schedules or more transactional matters, and that will be increasingly automated. I think if we look into the future for professionals in this space, you will see a shift start to happen where the focus moves to more strategic relationships and perhaps more ethical parts, ethical considerations. And this is where you can't replace humans, because that trust, that relationship part is absolutely key. And I do think that as a profession, people will need to adapt, build new skills, become data fluent, I would say. And there will definitely be a shift to relationship leadership when we have all these tools that are supporting. And I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I think that's actually very, very positive. So AI will never remove that human element, but I think it will become more involved over time. I think it will reshape the role that people have today and free people up to focus on the decisions that actually drive that true value and resilience for their organization, which is very positive. So the call to action for the profession would be to, again, just embrace AI. There are some brilliant solutions on the market. Of course, I will fly the flag for resolution, but there are so many AI platforms coming into the space that really do make not just a small difference, but an absolute material difference to day-to-day work. So embrace it would be my ask.
Thank you very much, Faye and Kasia. It was so good to have you both on for this episode. Really enjoyed that discussion. And it's worth me raising, actually, that you can hear even more from our two wonderful guests today on a SIPS webinar that we ran earlier in 2025. As ever, on the podcast, we'll pop a link to the episode description afterwards. But we had some great audience questions on that during that hour. So I thoroughly recommend going back and having a watch. And Faye, just a final question. If listeners would like to get in touch to get a better understanding of Resolution's platform, what's your advice? How could they get in touch?
You can go to the website. So it's www.resolution.com, or pop me an email, faye@resolution.com. I'd be delighted to hear from individuals and engage.
Thank you, Kasia.
Thank you.
And thank you, Faye.
Thank you.
What a brilliant conversation to wind up a brilliant mini-series. I hope you've taken some useful tips away from it. I know I have. And if you're a SIPS member, do share any of those takeaways on the SIPS Connect community platform. Equally, do feel free to share the series on social media and rate and review us if you've enjoyed it. A few takeaways from me, if I could wrap up from this series. I think number one, a commercial conflict is inevitable, unfortunately, but it is increasing in occurrence, it seems. So developing skills and using tools like AI to manage these situations are critical skills for procurement and supply professionals to show true value to their organizations. Number two, nothing is more important to resilient supply chains and continuity of supply than strong supplier relationships. Part of this will involve navigating complex commercial deals. Conflict will occur, but always remember that everyone should be looking for a win-win scenario. And finally, as long as it is used in an ethical and safe manner and you understand its limitations, AI is supercharging procurement's ability to deliver value for organizations, and particularly procurement and supply chain functions. Use cases are growing exponentially, it seems, with managing conflicts just another example, as we heard on this episode. But the human role, the skill and the experience of the procurement professional is still vital to maintaining those supplier relationships and delivering that ultimate outcome. I'll leave you with those thoughts and look forward to having you join us for the next SIPS podcast. Make sure you follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts if you're listening on those platforms, and do rate and review us, as I said earlier, if you can. A final thank you to Resolution for partnering with us for this series. We'll put a link in the episode description to their website if you'd like to find out a little bit more from the team. And of course to SIPS trainer Kurt Warren for joining us on episodes 1 and 2. Do make sure you go to sips.org to keep up with the latest from SIPS, including upcoming events, branch networking opportunities and training courses. And we'll see you next time.